Masha is a published writer of fantasy and science fiction and has extensive experience mentoring writers, both complete beginners and those with more experience. Two of her books have been shortlisted for the Nomo Awards for Best Speculative Fiction by an African Writer. Hi, Masha. Thanks for taking the time to chat to us today. We wanted to find out a little bit more about you so we can share this with the rest of our community who want to know more about our coaches. So I'm going to start off with a fairly easy one and ask, what is your role at Now Novel? What do you do?
Okay, so I'm a coach at Now Novel. So I work with writers and I help them create stories. So that would be, writing has got such a lot of different aspects to it. So some of it would be just like getting the story itself working. It's an exciting story, flows nicely, all of that kind of stuff. And some of it will be the actual mechanics of the language. So yeah, it's a big job.
Indeed. Thank you. We appreciate it. I know that you have written a series in the past, and I don't know if you've got any tips for us on how to write a series or any secrets about that.
Yeah, so writing a series is actually something that a lot of people are very interested, especially if you're self-publishing your books, because people who write, especially if you write genre fictions, fantasy, science fiction, mysteries, or anything like that, romance, readers are voracious and they fall in love with the characters and with the world that you've created, and they want to know what happens next. So the book is over, you got to write another one. So definitely writing a series is something to keep in mind, and it is actually can be a little bit tricky because you have to, you write the first book, you make all these decisions about what the characters do and what the rules of the magic system is or whatever it is. And now you publish it, lots of people read it, hopefully. And now you have to write the next book and suddenly you can't remember. Oops, why did this happen again? What was the name of that person's aunt? It can be a bit of a pain. So one of my tips would be like, as you're writing, you keep a sort of some people call it the book Bible, where you write down all of the things that might become important in the next book. But another tip is actually just to write the whole series and publish it all at once so that you can go back and change things in the first book, because everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I can imagine it's also, you don't know what the impact of things are going to be. So yes, when you're plotting, it's hard to plot out over an expected, I don't know, 3 or 4 book series or even longer.
Yes. Yeah, and sometimes it really depends on what kind of story it is you tell. I think some people find it easy to write a story in a book that comes to a nice, neat ending. But most people, the story comes and then there's always new stories starting and you start like, yes, but what happened to this one? And did that marriage work out? Or did the dragon die or whatever? And you want to know what happens next. So it always just keeps going.
Yeah, great. So aside from your previous stories that you've written, what do you find is your greatest writing inspiration? What is the source of that?
Yeah, obviously other books is a great source of inspiration, but actually any kind of story, whether it's a TV series that I'm watching or a movie or even sometimes an advertisement or something, anything that I find catches my attention, that I realize it's affecting me. So whether it is that I really dislike a character or I feel really curious about what's going to happen next, or as soon as I find that hook and I think, oh, how did they do that? How did that character in a TV series make me feel passionate about wanting to know what happens next or caring about that character? And you can kind of break it down into mechanical things like, does this character remind me of myself? Or is there something I'm jealous of them? Or am I feeling insecure? Or what's going on? So in terms of writing, you're actually learning about storytelling. You actually learn a lot about yourself as well.
And Masha, do you have a way of sort of taking that? Do you then, if you find something that piques your interest, do you write it down? Do you keep a book? Do you have a big file on your computer that talks about this is a character, this is an inciting incident? Or how do you actually take that inspiration and make it accessible to you?
That's a very good question. And that's also something that's going to be very different for different people because everybody's brain works differently, you know.
Yeah.
Some people really like having a little notebook with them. As soon as they think of something, they write it down. I'm just not that organized. I just kind of, what I do is I kind of have faith that if it's an important enough idea, I will remember it. So I just kind of try and keep track of the things that I feel passionate about. And, you know, yeah, but when I do sit down at my computer and I open a writing project, then the first thing I do is usually to write down, oh, think about the rabbit or whatever it is, you know, and then I can go back to that and remember what I want to do.
Masha, I mean, it's somewhat, I think, allied to that. You are multi-talented in that you illustrate as well as you write. How do those bits fit together? So I'm not an illustrator and I'm not a designer, or I don't really think in pictures, but do you, especially working within a realm that is quite fantastical, sci-fi, fantasy, that kind of realm, do you think in pictures first? Do you draw pictures first? Is there any interplay between that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I was trained as a visual artist. I haven't actually didn't think of myself as a writer, even though I've been a writer all my life. I really realized that relatively late. And my first few books, I illustrated my books. And gradually, as I went along, the illustrations became less, but I still draw as part of my writing process. So I will, for instance, draw a portrait of a character, partly to figure out what they look like, but also partly just because when you draw, you use a different part of your brain. And it can kind of free you up to have new ideas. But I've realized that I'm a very visual person, and I have a capacity to imagine visual scenes and put myself in my own visual imagination. And that's my writing process. I kind of pretend that I'm sitting in the tower and there's a rose bush over there and I can smell it, I can feel the air moving and all of those sorts of things. So it's very much a visual, tactile process for me, which is going to be different for different people. That really depends on what kind of brain you have.
Yeah, that's interesting, because mine does not think like that. I think I'd probably be more plot driven way around things.
Yes, and that's perfect. People are so just different. There isn't a right way to do it. You got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, of course. In terms of that, how does that play into cover design and things like that? Do you design your own covers, or are you the world's worst project manager around that? Or how?
Yeah. Cover design is interesting because now my books are self-published, and cover design is part of the more commercial side of it, because the books are not, I don't write the books just for myself. I want to find readers, and cover design, the cover of the book is sort of like a little advert where you try to very quickly communicate what kind of book it is, like the genre. You know, if you write a self-help book and it looks like a murder mystery, you're going to get some very disappointed readers. So there's a sort of a commercial, almost calculated design aspect that comes to it. But also because I design my own covers, I'm my own boss, so I can get away with quite a lot of things. And, you know, yeah, it's it's actually remarkably difficult, because it's just one image, one chance.
Yeah, I can imagine, because also you're trying to communicate the whole ethos of 80,000 words, while also showcasing that it's a cozy mystery and it's young adult and whatever. So you've got to use the signifiers while being alluring at the same time. It's a bit of a tightrope.
It's got to look, in a way, it's a contradiction, because you want the book to look familiar so people can recognize what it is, but it also must look different, because it mustn't look just the same and boring like everything else. So it's a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to turn it back to the writing side of things. What is the best piece of writing advice you've ever received?
That's there's anyone who's watching this will be aware by now, there is such a lot of writing advice out there. You can completely drown in it. And think the best, I can think of two, but I'll pick one. The
Well, you can
best
take two. I
writing
mean,
advice.
there's
Yeah,
no.
really two. The one is, if you're listening to writing advice and you start getting that feeling like, okay, I don't really know if I want to write. Maybe not for me. I'm probably not. Then that advice is bad advice for you. That's like, because people are different and people write differently. They're, some people have children, some people are, very busy lives. Some people struggle to write verbally. So you got to learn what works for you. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that you have to write the book that you would just love to read. That's the most important thing to keep in mind. You picture that book in your mind. You're going into a library or a bookshop, you pick up this book and you just instantly go, "Ooh, this is the one. I just want to go home now and I want to read it." That's the book you have to write.
Okay, cool. And what are the attributes of the book you have to read? So I mean, how would one know what that is?
That's self-knowledge. So that's the thing, is that you, to some extent, look, it's also, that's the kind of writer I am, because I'm also I'm not really a commercial writer. So some people are going to be very much about like studying the markets and figuring out what's popular at the moment. I don't really do that. It's not that the one is all worse than the other. It's just that I'm not good at it. So I'm playing to my strengths. So I write for myself. And then, I will just sort of go into that space of realizing, oh, I really like stories about, fill in the dots for yourself. Because the thing is, writing is really hard work. And there's a lot of it. It's like, I once heard someone say, it's a bit like surfing. You paddle out and you paddle out and the water's cold, and then you catch a wave and it's fantastic. And then you go all the way out to the beach and then you have to paddle out again. There's a lot of tedious, hard work, and it's lonely. So you have to find a way of making it really interesting and exciting for yourself so that you believe in your own project and you don't kind of go like, why am I doing this? I'm sitting here alone by myself, writing a book that nobody's probably ever going to read because it's so boring, because I don't even want to read it, So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Masha, one more question well, I think I might even ask a second question, but in terms of those pieces of advice, how do you use them? How do you make them practical for other writers? So for people you're coaching, sorry. So yes. How do you infuse people with that, and how do you help people to see that?
So so the first one was like the advice that you're listening to. You got to have enough self-knowledge to realize whether this is good advice for you. So coaching is going to be a bit of a give and take, where I'm figuring out like, who are you? What are your goals? I need to find out what are you trying to achieve? What kind of book are you trying to write, so that I understand what you are trying to do. And it's a ongoing conversation as we're learning about each other, and you figure out what my biases are and so on, And the second thing is a very similar one, where I can, it's tricky because sometimes the temptation as a writer is to sort of tell someone, oh, I can see this possibility in your book. Maybe it should be about, this is. And that can feel very bad to the person who's getting the advice, because you want to have those ideas yourself. You don't want somebody else telling you what you should be doing. So I try and keep it, it's like, I'm a teacher outside of this writing coaching as well. I teach people how to do graphic design and things like that. And one of the big lessons I found as a teacher is that you can't really teach people how to do anything. You can only really create a space for them to teach themselves. So to create a space where you feel safe and unjudged and inspired, that's my job as a writing coach.
Masha, that was a lovely way to end it, I think. Thank you. That creating the space and giving people the opportunity to believe in themselves and achieve their own writing. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Masha.
Excellent. Thank you.